Welcome to the Maple Leafs Hot Stove Podcast, episode 117. I'm Nick Ashbourne, joined as always by Anthony Petrielli. Anthony, when this time for recording the podcast was planned, it seemed like what would be going through was going to be just, how did the Leafs respond to seeing the Ducks again after the Austin Matthews incident? That's kind of what we mainly talked about in our last episode, was the response to that. We were going to get a sequel here, and we may, to some degree, touch on that by the end of this episode, but we would be remiss and neglectful of our duties if we didn't lead here with the dismissal of general manager Brad Treliving. And so I think both you and I, and most people probably would have expected this to just kind of be a death march to the end of the season and then the axe to come down then. It's sort of unusual from a timing perspective. And we heard from Keith Pelley as well the day that we're recording this on Tuesday. We're going to go through both those things, but let's just start basic, Anthony. Like, what was your reaction to seeing the news of Brad Treliving's firing on Monday?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have to do a full, review of his tenure. It was obvious that he had to go at this point. We recorded that podcast live after the trade deadline and just sat here stunned at how bad it was. It was a really bad trade deadline. And that seemed to have been the nail in the coffin, so to speak. I know that there's been a lot of talk about the timing of it, but effectively, if we understand things that are being reported, and I did talk to a few people as well in advance of recording this episode, the crazy thing is they went into the Olympic break thinking about talking about an extension, right? Brad Treliving had 1 year left on his deal. They didn't want to have a lame duck GM. That in isolation makes complete sense. You can't have a lame duck GM with no president, with any hockey background above him, and like that's the guy. That doesn't make any sense. It would not work. But the fact that the first thought there was extension, and that was at the Olympic break, they weren't doing well. It's also ironic that if you kind of piece it together, Brad Treliving came out at the deadline and said we had decided to sell before the Olympic break, right? So if you're, kind of looking at the puzzle pieces here, it's like you knew you were bad, you decided to sell, you actively thought about having extension talks over the break, and then they just came out of that break and were so unbelievably bad. I don't even think it has anything to do with the trade deadline. Maybe not anything, but I think it was more to do with how bad they were coming out of that break, which was dreadful. And then they effectively decided to make that decision. And it sounded like Treliving knew it. I don't want to kick a guy while he's down and, myself included, criticize at the time the multiple media availabilities he had where he just was unable to articulate a plan forward. And, I guess some of that probably was in that he didn't know if he would be the general manager anymore. And it seemed as if he kind of read the tea leaves. Both Darren Dreger and Elliot Friedman reported separately that it was really Treliving kind of putting the pressure on the Leafs just to say, all right, if you've made a decision, then like just do it. Like I don't want to hang around here for a month or whatever the case is. And if you're him, that makes sense. Why would he continue to get put through the meat grinder? And so here we are today.
It's kind of funny because when I think about the unpleasantness associated with kind of finishing out the string, and like it's not fun. There's no purpose in the season. People want the pure tank and they want to get that pick, but the likelihood has always kind of been against that. I guess it's technically not impossible. Like you can't even make any transactions anymore if you're the GM. I get that it's not fun to be in this position, but like what Berube is doing as the coach seems much less fun. Like he actually has to do a job day in, day out, where it doesn't seem like the players really like or respect him too much, and he doesn't seem to have a future. Like I could almost see it more like from Berube's perspective, just being like, fucking just get rid of me. Like I don't want to do. And you kind of have seen Berube get more crotchety over the last couple of weeks, Whereas like Treliving doesn't really have to, he could just kind of hide. And anyway, it's fine. Like if he felt like this is kind of embarrassing and stupid and I don't want to be part of this, from what Keith Pelley said, like it felt like he was really kind of engaged in his investigation already of like what could have possibly gone wrong? Like where's the dysfunction? Like and what should the future be? And I get it because Pelly doesn't come to these things from a position of having knowledge. So that's like his instinct is like, I need to do what I can to figure out what happens. And maybe that isn't as stupid as it sounds to people who've been watching this team night in, night out and can identify all sorts of things that have been wrong with this team. Yeah, both inside the room and coaching and all the way up. Like you said, I don't think we have to like relitigate Trilling's whole tenure with the Maple Leafs, but this had to happen. Like there, if this hadn't happened,
It,
it would have been insane.
it's so frustrating in that the deadline didn't have to be that bad. You know, someone competent could have ran a successful deadline to the point where you would have felt at least okay going into the offseason. And by that, it should have been multiple things. It should have been clearing a few contracts that just shouldn't be here anymore. You know, continuing to stockpile your assets. And again, we'll just reiterate, all they did at the deadline at best was make themselves whole for next year. Right?
And
They
they didn't
didn't add
even really
additional.
do that with the
They didn't
quality of
add
the first
additional.
round pick they're going to get, which is not good because it's Colorado.
Yeah, I mean it's not great, but they do have 2 seconds. So like a late first 2 seconds. I'm not saying that's the equivalent of a top 10 pick or anything, but that is a decent setup, all things considered. So like you're looking at a situation where you have a top 10 protected first and you have those 3 picks. Like you can work within that. That's not crazy. Right now it's crazy because they don't have two of the next three. But in, what, 2 months or 3 months, it's not going to be as daunting of a task. So but it's a tough one because again, it didn't have to be that bad. They could have done a lot more to make you feel better about things moving forward. And or as part of that, they could have fired the coach, taken a look at some guys under a different voice to make more educated decisions moving forward, as opposed to this current mess where they still routinely get just absolutely tilted. And the coach is doing things like calling out the goalie while that's happening.
I mean, that the Wool Carolina one was
It
absolutely
was
ludicrous.
a microcosm for his tenure here. It's like, why didn't the goalies bail me out? I actually didn't even disagree with him per se. Like I watched the game too, thinking like you're allowed to save a breakaway. Like that wasn't,
Yeah, but that's
but
not
like
how a
that's not
goaltending
no, but that's
performance
not
works. It's not like, oh, I didn't like the goals. It's like, but
no,
also there was a bunch of saves that easily could have been goals. Like you have
no,
to look
like
at it holistically. You can't just be like, ooh,
yeah,
that moment wasn't great.
yeah. I mean, you let me finish this. All I was gonna say is like I watched and went like you could save a breakaway, but like that was my indoor voice, my outdoor voice, my projected message is like they tilted us, and if we get outplayed, you know what I mean? Like everyone's gonna have things that they're gonna say internally and externally. If your external thoughts are like, hey, the goalie could have made another save. What are your internal thoughts? Like that's just ludicrous. But then the flip side to all of this is, about the bad deadline and keeping the coach. And effectively, they should have tanked properly then, which is what Florida's doing. Like the fact that Florida might actually get the fifth overall pick now makes me want to vomit. Like I'm sick to my stomach just watching them shut down. Like every game, they're shutting down a new player, and it's gross. Like it's hard for me to actively look at it now. The Leafs are going to hand Boston, I don't know, eighth overall, and we're gonna actually watch the Florida Panthers draft fifth overall. Um, so like they could have done a million better things there, but the crazy thing is, on the other side of that is, had that mess not happened, I don't know if we're sitting here today or anytime in the next few months talking about Brad Treliving no longer being the general
Well,
manager.
and this is the thing is, and this is, I don't know if this is going to sound crazy in terms of the way you value hockey executives or value having them leave town, which is what I'm getting at. But like, I would rather have this unbelievably uninspired trade deadline and an assurance that Treliving is seeing the door
Yes.
than having like a good trade deadline. Like, say you got a good package for Ekman Larson, maybe you did something interesting, maybe you found a way to get rid of Domi or something. Like a trade deadline that we both agreed, like, oh, actually that was pretty good, and Treliving did it, and then you had to worry about the specter of Treliving returning. That would be a worse scenario for the Maple Leafs. So like as and like you said, we don't know exactly to what degree that deadline was the finisher on this decision being made, but it seems like based on the timeline you laid out, like it very much was a factor. And weirdly, like I feel better about it now from the team perspective because it gives them chance to clean house and, get this train back on the tracks. And it might be a slow, difficult process, but at least they'll have a leader who you have some faith in. Or maybe they'll hire someone terrible, but like theoretically they could have a leader you have some faith in.
What? Why can't we just have our cake and eat it too? Why couldn't they just had a respect? And the cake and eating it too is just like a reasonable trade deadline after a brutal season of management, and then firing that manager and coach, and then just hiring better people. Like that's our cake
Yeah,
and
I
eating
mean,
it too here. That's
but
not a crazy
that would be
cake.
us trusting Pelley and MLC, right? Like that would be us saying, "Oh, they've got their finger to the pulse, so they understand what's going on." But the fact they were talking extension with Brad Treliving in February is an indication that they are not to be trusted. And like we'll talk
No.
more about Pelley, but like the degree to which you trust the leadership above the hockey level is, that is a serious concern for the future of this team. And they might get this hiring decision right, and that will matter more. Like if they bring in a president or a president GM or president GM combo, we don't know exactly what the structure is. And those people are really good at their jobs at finding players to put on the ice who make sense and make this a good team. I think that matters more than concerns that you have about MLC and the leadership above that layer. But it doesn't mean that those worries don't matter.
Which probably is a good segue to just get into the press conference, and I guess currently what would be the face of the team off the ice, which is Keith Pelley. Again, we should note that, well, not again, but we should note that he did say that Brad Pridham and Ryan Hardy would essentially be the co-GMs in the interim. I don't think that's nothing. I They have signed a few college free agents. I was hoping that they would be able to lure one of the highly regarded college free agents. I mean, I have hopes for TJ Hughes. He's from Hamilton, like he's from the area. Makes sense, like for most guys to, you either play for the Marlies at Rico or you play for the Leafs Toronto. But either way, you're in Toronto. His family's around. He played for Michigan. He's a right shot. The Leafs have essentially no right shots at forward. He's a bit older. I'm not sitting here and saying that I'm projecting this guy to be some sort of star, anything, not even Tyler Bozak for that matter. But you know what? Like, again, older, right shot, decent size. I think the Leafs offer a decent opportunity right now, just given how bad they are, to walk right into the lineup. I don't know how this impacts any future ability in the meantime to recruit free agents and from the college route. And when you don't have any picks, that's realistically it's the best you can do. And so, look, it's a side note. Again, that's not you're not going to sit there and say, "Well, we're not going to fire Brad Treliving. We're trying to get this college free." Like that's the most important thing. That's not lost on me. It's just a little side story as we then get into Keith Pelley, who, he did come out with his press conference, and I will call it a mixed bag. I don't want to say the whole thing was bad because it wasn't. There were a few things that he said that I agree with in theory. We will see if he executes those things. And then there were a bunch of things where you were just kind of squinting and like eyebrow raising and wondering what on earth he was talking about. And which one do you want to start with, Nick?
Let's start with some of the peculiar stuff and some of the unimpressive stuff. It'll give us an opportunity to end on a more positive note. And some of the stuff is kind of just funny to me. Like the tangent of him talking about and like really praising the Habs and the Sabres for a second there. It felt like he got lost in that tangent. The fact that he name checked Vinny Borghese and was like amazing with the Marlies,
That
incredible skill. Like it kind of shows that he had done some prep work because like clearly he doesn't know what's going on at that level, and I'm not saying that he should, like he shouldn't really know who Vinny Borghese is, but like he'd done some prep work that was clearly kind of haphazard and half-assed. And I'm not saying that that's a massive condemnation of him. If anything, I guess he's trying to dispel the idea that people have that he's sort of out of touch with the hockey element and maybe can't be
but
trusted there. So he's trying to demonstrate some knowledge, but like that's one of the first things that jumped out to me is like you're not beating those allegations by name checking weird stuff and having mispronunciations and then talking about how the Habs and Sabres came out of nowhere as if that was really the big factor that went wrong this season. Like it, some of that stuff did reinforce the notion of like, okay, this guy is, he is a corporate guy who's not necessarily in touch with what's happening on the ice level.
yeah, but why that didn't make any sense to me is he made a point at the beginning of talking about, all the commentary that he's involved in hockey operations, and then he explicitly made a point to, I'm just pulling it up right now. I am not here to be a scout. I am not here to be a coach. I am not here to be a general manager. I have no desire to give input on who should play left wing. And then he proceeds to talk about an undersized college defenseman that they signed who has 1 point in 2 games with the Marlies and talks about him showing off incredible talent. He starts rhyming off Habs and Sabres prospects and calling both those franchises trains. And it just the whole thing was bizarre to me in that sense where I was sitting there going, on one hand, you're trying to tell us like I'm not involved in this stuff. Like that's not what I do here. I'm setting out organizational structure and mandate. Fair. And that's like, well, then why are you getting into the weeds in this presser about
No,
various things? Like it was like you
no
were
one
trying.
asked him about the Habs. No one asked him about Vinny Borghese. We'll put it that way.
No,
No one was like, "What's your
it
take on the rise of the Buffalo Sabres?"
it literally felt to me like a guy trying to prove that he like knew random things about the league, and that made me feel worse about it because someone who is secure and strong in what it is that they're trying to do and knows their limits would have just stuck within that. Like he could have just ended at the opening introduction that he had just to say like, look, like I'm not involved, like I hear that chatter going out, but then to on the flip side get asked about things and then try to interject yourself in there is just that was a little bit of a red flag for me, and it was kind of like I don't know if I trust fully what you're saying because those don't make sense to me. I don't think you need to be talking about those teams and random players they may or may not have and various other things or even random guys on the Marlies because if that's not your department, which you told us, then that's really the end of the conversation, right? Like there's not much else to say at that point.
And
So,
and where that escalates a little bit is when he's asked about, okay, this season was not a good season. Is it a retool or is it a rebuild? And he circled back on this after the first time he answered the question, he kind of let it go. And I think another question came in, and then he circled back. He's like, I feel like I didn't answer that question. So he really wanted to answer the question. And he specifically said, like, we have foundational players that we're going to build around. This is more retooled than like he was very clear on that. But again, like you said, if he is the person who's saying, like, I'm not in the weeds at the hockey level, like the correct answer to that question is my role is to find the best hockey leadership for this franchise. And that person is going to determine what quality is on this roster and the best way forward to win the Stanley Cup, whether that's a shorter or longer route. Like we're going to empower someone who understands what it takes to build a champion and we're going to figure that process. Like, even if it is a bit of a non-answer, that would have been a better answer because it would have reaffirmed the idea that whoever's getting hired here is the person who has the vision for what this team is going to be on the ice. Whereas when he says, oh, we have foundational players, that kind of implies the person who's coming in already has a bit of a mandate hanging around over their shoulders, being like, you got to go try and win with these guys in the immediate term.
Yeah. And I also felt like he left some leeway to whoever they hire to kind of decide direction. But then again, at the same time, was like, yeah, we're not rebuilding. Like, this is a retool. So it's like, well, I don't know which one. Again, I don't know how tight knit you are to this. It feels like you are. It feels like this is the big team. Obviously, everyone knows that under the MSLE umbrella, no brainer. And it's the team people care. It's the team that the most people care about. It's not people care about the Raptors and people care about TFC. Like, I'm not putting down those things, but there are more people on this
Yeah,
planet
this is a
Earth that
business, and the
care.
Leafs are the biggest part of the business.
And it feels like it's easier to be like, well, I'm not as involved with TFC. It's like, well, yeah, I'm sure. That's not as big of a deal if you aren't. So it feels like because of that, that he's maybe a little bit more involved or watchful. At the same time, as much as I didn't trust Treliving, obviously, I didn't even like hearing him say that he was in the room for trade deadline. Who wants that? Why are you there? He's like, well, to observe. Like, I didn't say anything. Like, oh yeah, so you sat there in dead silence the entire day. Like, you're gonna tell me that
Great
with a
for the
straight
work
face.
environment. Everybody's boss is sitting there staring everyone down and observing them in silence. Perfect situation to get the best
And
work done.
I'm not even saying that he negotiated any trades or like approved or
No,
denied
he
or
probably
anything to that
did.
effect. But I'm saying, like, if you think that guy didn't say a single word in that room all day, I have magic beans in my pocket. Let me know when you want to buy them. There's just no way. So I think, yeah, he can't be involved. A bunch of the things he said just didn't make sense. He tries to say that it's going to be data centric, and it just felt like the use of a buzzword. It's like those are borderline table stakes. Like, you're going to use some data to make decisions. Like, welcome to the year
Yeah,
2026
like
in
I'm
any
planning
industry ever.
to hire an 80-year-old Neanderthal with no one under him with any understanding of how these analytics work. Like, what are you talking about? And again, a lot of people took that to mean like, let me think of the person who is the most data oriented I can think of, and that person is their number one candidate. I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case. The Leafs have much more of a history of getting a big name as opposed to someone like that, and you can also do both, right? You can get the bigger name president, and then the person with the GM title is someone who's more notable for what they've done in the analytics area. But yeah, like obligatory mention of artificial intelligence. It's like, yeah, I'm sure that at a certain level things are happening with AI as a tool. No one cares. No one thinks that that is a big part of this, or like you said, it's table stakes. It's kind of the default position. It would be a radical position to be like, we reject all data. We think numbers are false. Everyone is gonna use it. Everyone is going to have people on staff who understand. I guess to some degree, you could argue it's about fostering a culture where people who bring that forward are actually listened to and respected, and what they have to say is taken into consideration. Because there's certainly been cases in sports where you have this analytics department, and then there are people who are actually making decisions who just don't really give a shit of what they have to say. But that's like a bigger organizational question that I don't think we're necessarily going to have an answer to anytime soon. So people really glommed onto that, as you mentioned, but I'm not sure it's as big a deal as some people think it is, especially people for whom it affirms their worldview.
Also, how bizarre was the comment that said every single decision we will make will be evidence-based? Evidence-based decisions are never wrong. 100% everyone's just working. Just every single team in the league should implement evidence-based decision making. I don't know how anyone like just whatever.
Like he's probably trying to say that like evidence based decision making is right in the sense that the process is correct. But again, first of all, best case scenario, you come out sounding like, Ross Atkins 10 years ago when he was despised. And like, it's just, again, as you said, it is the baseline. You are using some level of evidence to make decisions.
What an insane comment. And then you got to sit there and go, well, this is the guy who's going to hire everybody and put everything into place. And the crazy thing is now that we've kind of picked apart a few of the negative things he said, I actually didn't mind most of the stuff he said about actually hiring in the sense that he wasn't he wasn't set on we're hiring a president, we're hiring a GM, like any sort of structure. And look, there seems to be a lot of talk about the president of hockey ops because they got rid of Brendan Shanahan, never backfilled him, and the season was what it was. But the biggest problem with the season is that Treliving did a terrible job, and that was the
Yeah, a
leader. Like
good GM could
that,
have created a better scenario for the team. It wasn't because there wasn't a president. I thought it was interesting. Like this is clearly his area of expertise, right? Like you can tell when he's comfortable and when he's not comfortable. And when he's talking about structure and leadership, like you can argue to what degree that has value, to what degree some of the stuff is bullshit, the theory around it, but clearly that is what Pelly knows and understands. And I actually, I learned something when he said, okay, well, look around the league. Here are the structures. One third of the teams have a GM and no president. One third have a GM and a president. One approximately, he had the exact numbers. Like one third have a GM president combination. Like I didn't know that. But like that's the sort of thing that he is clearly interested in and is studying. And that is the sort of thing he should be interested in, is the sort of thing he should be studying. And as you said, he did show a level of flexibility of it doesn't have to look one way. Like we'll find the right people and put the right structure in place to enable them to work. Like I think that is, again, it's not revolutionary, but it seems to project some level of competence.
it's look, any sort of structure can work. I actually prefer that they're not set on one. It's genuinely going to be based on who they hire and what makes sense based off that arrangement. Like, for example, we hear Doug Armstrong a lot. If they were to hire Doug Armstrong, I would want a general manager under Doug Armstrong. Like, he hasn't done a good enough job for a very long time now, where I would just say give him everything and let him run the entire ship, president and GM. But if you said, look, he's an experienced guy, he's been in the league for people forget, he won a cup with Dallas in 99. He's been around for a very long time. And if that guy
He
is,
was in the foot in the crease cup. He was the
yeah,
assistant general manager for that.
like if that guy is leading your hockey department, gets Keith Pelley completely away, and then you, I don't know, bring in some sort of young up and coming hockey mind of sorts to be the general manager, and then you create this structure, that makes complete sense to me. You could also just sit there and say, like, we're just going to hire a very good GM and just go about it that way, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with that, too. You just sit there and you hire a very good GM, and if you do that, you will need someone with the pedigree that can basically make Keith Pelley go away, right? Someone who's like not just competent enough, but genuinely good enough. That's like, no, like I'm not taking this job if you're anywhere near me while I'm working, essentially, right? Like that would be fine. Like it doesn't, like there's no issue with that on my mind. It'll be just more based on whoever it is that they hire and how they structure things. I would just kind of happy to hear that they weren't locked in on one sort of way of doing it. I thought that was probably the best news of the whole, for at least in my opinion. Like I said, I think there's just been this rabbit hole now where people think like you can only succeed with the president of hockey operations,
Yeah,
you know?
I
And
don't
I don't buy
agree
it.
with
I don't
that
buy it.
premise. I
We're,
like I
we're
would
what, a year removed from people being like, no more Shanahan,
Yeah,
just streamline
Shanahan's meddling.
decisions.
They can't make
He,
they
he
can't make
was
the trades they want to make.
he was blocking Dubas from trades and all this stuff. And now everyone's like, gotta hire a president of hockey ops. It's like, why? It just depends who you hire and if they're good or if they suck. Like it doesn't matter. If you have to dangle that though to get someone that's legit, then great, you have it now. Like you're like the world is their oyster on this one. That's how they should be treating this.
Yeah, I would have like very slight preferences in the abstract. Like you said, it depends on who you get for these positions, right? If you get just a general manager, but that general manager has a level of experience and pedigree where you feel like there's no need to babysit that person and they're not going to get influenced really kind of in any way by Pelly, that's fine. If you get a president and general manager, I think that that's great. One, because you get a general manager, as you mentioned, potentially a little bit younger, up and comer, like, a talent you develop the same way you develop a talent on the ice. And then you have two people in the room. Like you just have more perspectives, more diverse opinion. Just like, I don't know. I generally think two heads are better than one. And so I like that idea potentially, but there are ways in which if it's the wrong two people, it totally doesn't work. The president and GM as one, like that's just title inflation. Like you're just the GM and we're paying you more and you have a nicer item on your resume. So again, if it's the right person, and that person, as you mentioned, probably needs to have that dangled in order to come to Toronto, but you have all the faith in the world in them, sure, that can absolutely work. But yeah, I guess my slight preference would be for president, GM, if only to have more brain power in the room, and also just because the Leafs have a ton of money, and that's one of the advantages they have is to be able to bring in, you know, people at big salaries, potentially more than one of them. So, and kind of why not use that? But the person is more important than the structure. Build the structure to fit the person as opposed to building finding the person to fit some idealized version of what you want the structure to be. And
Yeah.
Pelly does seem to understand that.
And to that note too, he did also say it's wide open in terms of experience. He didn't say like we're hiring someone with experience per se. It's not this guy has to be someone who's been a general manager in the league before. It was we're looking.
I will
So
that aspect, generally speaking, I like to bet on intelligence and competence more than like a lengthy resume. Sometimes resumes are a little bit hard to parse and hard to interpret because it's never one person who gets certain tasks done. To what degree does Doug Armstrong have any credit for the 1999 Stars Stanley Cup? Probably not a ton at the end of the day. He was the assistant general manager. But one thing that does scare me a little bit is when names get floated with people who have like no related experience. Like when a lot of people started talking about, and this is not inside the organization, it's, in the media, people throw names out. When people throw candidate lists out, like I don't take them that seriously sometimes because sometimes people have reasons for floating certain names, certain relationships, things like that. But like, say Chris Pronger was picked, like that would make me nervous because it's like, oh, this person has no related experience
what
whatsoever.
what are Chris Pronger's credentials right now? They're basically he's
That's
like
that exactly.
popped on a few
That's
podcasts and like meeting. I'm not saying he's even going to be bad. I'm just saying like that's pretty
That would be like
wild.
you got to have a president over him, would be my opinion if you went that route. I mean, I saw Jason Spezza, another list people threw out. Like at least he's worked under Dubas in Pittsburgh a little bit. But again, guys having played is not sufficient qualification for me. And we've seen stories of guys who played who did really well, and we've seen counter examples, but the idea that people like a Pronger in part because what they saw when he played, like that makes me nervous. But I don't get the
Do
impression
people
from
like what they saw when Brendan Shanahan played? He was one of the best power forwards of all time and then presided over one of the softest teams of this decade.
well,
Cares, makes
yeah,
no
he was someone who
difference.
had experience that wasn't relevant
I
experience. So it was
I
pretty
love
weird
I know, but I'm
how that
saying Brendan
happened.
Shanahan as a player, I loved.
Oh yeah.
He fought heavyweights and he was unbelievable scorer. Like he was like a perfect winger in my opinion, basically. Massive, unbelievably talented, fight anyone, total like gamer, completely understood gamesmanship. Everything about him, I loved him as a player. And then he actually just watched them be incredibly soft for like 10 years here. So who cares? Makes no difference. I also don't like this thing that happens, and this is like a Leafs thing. This isn't a Keith Pelley thing. It's like Chris Pronger is from Ontario. And then you get these guys, and you'll see it more with certain guys that retire in coming years or have recently retired. And it's like when they played in the league, they wanted nothing to do with the Leafs. Absolutely nothing. As guys that are from Ontario. And I don't know, just personally, it pisses me off when it's like, yeah, I'll come home at the end. Or I'll come home when I have, I watched the Amazon broadcast um last year, like the whatever the thing was that covered it, right? They had an episode on Brendan Shanahan. And there was a point where he basically said, like, this is like the coolest thing I did in my career. Like this is the thing like my dad would have been like most happy with. There's something to that effect. I'm like, how long did you play in the league, buddy? What'd you play for? St. Louis, Jersey,
Yeah, didn't he
Detroit,
play?
the
He played till he was like
Rangers?
42 or something. Like,
I don't remember you putting a Leafs jersey on. And look, I'm not saying the Leafs should spite every guy who doesn't come home, but it would be nice to have some standard where it's like, look, like if you want to be here, like John Tavares, I will have a lot of time for because he was like, I'm 28 and I'm coming back, not I'm 40 or I'm retired. Like, have some standards. They have so many guys that are from here, they grow up here, they watch it, they love it, and then they get into the league and they're like, ah. It's like, okay, then you don't belong here. Like, this isn't for you then. Like,
well,
this is
like
a privilege.
the scrutiny also that people sometimes don't want that is associated with playing with the Maple Leafs, like the increased media attention, the fact everyone's watching on Saturday night, all that jazz. Like, if you didn't like that idea as a player, guess what? As an executive, you're going to be dealing with that too. So, if you were someone who wasn't attracted to the idea of the Leafs as a player, you know, some of these same issues are going to come up as executive. I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole because it's a bit of a straw man, to be honest. We don't know who the candidates are at this point, although like a lot of people are saying Armstrong, and I get why that's the obvious candidate. But that's actually being, kind of reported the level of interest by people like Friedman, not just kind of people saying it because he's an obvious guy. I'm not going to claim to have a firm grasp on how that contract works and how if they can get him out of it. I did think it was funny when Pelly was asked, like, would you be willing to hire guys at kind of the same level they're at now, even though that's not really considered the best thing to do, and you're supposed to give some kind of promotion or whatever. And he's like, I'll do anything that will make the Toronto Maple Leafs win the Stanley Cup. And I'm like, if you were a different person who was able to carry off that energy, I think people would actually really like that sort of assertion that he'd be willing to be totally ruthless in this process, but like nothing about him radiates like I'm ruthless and I'm gonna pursue any avenue to make the Leafs great. That's not the vibe he's giving out.
I mean, he didn't rule anything else. That's basically the best I could manage on that. I don't know if he's going to explore every avenue, but he didn't rule anything out. So that, like, that leaves the door open for that.
Yeah, you could have hope now that they do something interesting or creative, and then like we'll find out in early May it's Doug Armstrong, as everyone expected.
Now, he also he also sort of alluded, and speaking of like people being from here and not playing here and like the organization and look, I've been on the record about this a million times. Like to me, they should be conducting themselves like they're the cream of the crop. Like it should be nauseating to other fans the way that they conduct themselves because it should be to a higher standard. And if I look at generally what has been like the top organizations in other sports in their heyday, that's what they've done. Like the prime Yankees, the prime Manchester United, prime Cowboys, the whatever. Like they all accumulated talent, but the way that they conducted themselves, the Patriots, the Cowboys might be an interesting one there to say. Probably not, if anything, but the Patriots for sure. You kind of go through and there's like a certain accountability and a standard that they have. And I thought that this was an I thought this was a particularly interesting quote because he was asked about defining culture. And at the end of the answer, he said, some of the things that happened this year shouldn't happen in the Leafs culture, and it won't going forward. And no one pressed him on that. And I look, if you were like, well, what do you mean, Keith? I don't think he would have said anything. Like
I no,
I'm
there's
sure he
no
wouldn't
way.
have. But I paused when I heard that live and went, yeah. I mean, I've look, the most obvious one that stands out is the lack of the response to Matthews. Like that does point to some level of culture issue. It's unacceptable. It is unacceptable. We talked about it then. We don't need to go through the whole thing all over. I think it's anyone who would argue against it. I don't know what that's not this sport. I'm sorry. That unacceptable response. But, I thought about things like the Nylander middle finger. And if you're like you are look, I didn't agree with the George Peros fine of it. Like that's a different the Department of Player Safety portion of that middle finger is different than how I feel about it were I running the Toronto Maple Leafs. Because am I paying someone $11.5 million in the middle of a brutal season to do something that childish and immature? No. Like there's no way I'm for it. That would piss me off, Nick.
This,
If I'm the president of that team and I'm watching that, I'm like, you are making how much money? And this team is brutal this year. And you're one of the leaders, and I gotta watch that on camera. I'm beside myself angry at that.
yeah, the fact that he's a 10-year vet, not Easton Cowan, makes a difference there, right? Because like
Yeah.
if it's a 20-year-old and it's, he's scratched, things are going badly, he has never had any scrutiny like this before, that's different. But yeah, I mean, I'm the person who's often going to ride to Nylander's defense, but it does feel like as things have turned sour with this season, he has not had a great capacity for handling that. Like he's handled his business on the ice in the sense that he's produced at a very high level
What
on a per game
what is
basis.
what does he have? 74 points and
Four
or 70
points
71 points in
last night.
59 games?
Yeah, like
It,
he's putting the puck in the net, he's setting guys up. I mean, I guess you could criticize it to some degree. Has he been too much of a playmate? We're not going to break down Nylander's game tape in the middle of this lost season, but whatever. Like he's been fine on the ice. Um, but sometimes people show you who they are a little bit more when things aren't going so great, and what starts off as a little bit of like eccentricity turns into a bit of shittiness. And there's just like he's not, it doesn't always feel good natured from him these days. And maybe that is going to be isolated to this year, but he has changed the way I kind of shrug off concerns about his headspace and his attitude. In the past, I didn't have a lot of time for that kind of talk. But I think he's given it a little bit of oxygen this year. And that's unfortunate for him and for the team.
I just think everything about what they do is unprofessional. And not just Nylander. I mean, he's an easy one to point to. He makes a lot of money. He's a poster boy for it. I don't even like, and look, this will resonate with probably the older portion of our listener base, and with the younger base, they'll probably roll their eyes. But I don't even like watching them the way that they put on like a fashion show and walk into the games. And I know that's been like a hot topic at times, but if I'm, look, and I'm just saying this is me, and you can disagree, and that's fine. Everything if you look at high performing teams, if you look at even business cultures, like they're not like, yeah, just walk in a t-shirt and come do your job. If you were in like some sort of military, like the high performing teams that are like literally life and death, they're not like, hey, everyone can just kind of like do what they want when they show up, and then we'll just like flip a switch and try our best, and we'll see how it plays out. And if not, we may or may not flip off the camera. And I'm just sitting there for like, I'm running the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm like, I want some level of consistency. I want guys that are showing up professional. I'm definitely not having some like Instagram account where it's like a fashion show before every damn game. those aren't the standards that I would set out blank slate to run a franchise. And I get that people are just gonna say, well, that's not why they're bad, and it's not why they're bad. But I'm just telling you, blank slate. If I'm running it, like I want everything top to bottom, extremely detailed and dialed in, and nothing is detailed or dialed in about anything they do off the ice, and it translates on the ice. Like you know, look good, feel good, play good is a real thing. And instead, I'm just kind of watching. I'm just like, these guys are coming in like this is a fun league. Like this is just a fun little thing that they do. And that's often how they start games, which is not ready to go. And just the whole thing about it, again, it is the Toronto Maple Leafs. It should have higher standards. Like you want to play in Columbus and go put a t-shirt on and a pair of jeans and walk into the arena, have fun. That's not what we do here. Like this is the Leafs. Like no one cares more. No one gets more volume than this team. No one gets more eyeballs. No one gets more attention. Like, and you could sit there and sort of like wilt in it, or you can hold yourself to a higher standard that comes with it as part of the accountability of being a Leaf. And look, I don't know what he was alluding to per se. He might have just been alluding to the lack of the Matthews response when he talked about that. But that comment really just kind of gave me some pause in terms of culture. And I look at it across the board. It's like Matthews wins the gold, and then you get the Hughes brothers, right? Talk about Matthews being a winner at the podium. And with Matthews there, and he kind of just like laughs and is like, "Yeah, that's my answer," and like whatever. And there just seems to be this narrative that like this is the worst place to play. It's out there. Would you disagree?
No,
Like you
I
have
think that
guys,
we can debate to what degree that's true as a reality on
sure,
the ground, but there are definitely a lot of people who believe that statement, and some of those people are players.
sure, right? And then you had, Kachuk and Marchand taking their shots when they dusted the Leafs in game 7. And it's like these things happen. I've never heard a Leaf be like those guys can F off. I've never heard them like come to defense of being a Leaf in those situations. If someone asked them separately, it's like, yeah, do you like playing here? Yeah, I love it, blah blah blah. But it's not like it's not as if they jump in those scenarios and go, "Whoa, hold on." Like it's awesome being there. Like worry about your own team. Like go worry about New Jersey. You've made the playoffs once in your entire career, Jack Hughes. Maybe you worry about that. Don't worry about Toronto and what we're doing, right? And it's like, "Oh, you guys, the pressure, it killed them." It's like, "Hey, no one gives a shit about you guys. Your rink is empty again and no one cares and knows that you're playing hockey anymore now that you're a bottom team again this year, Florida." Maybe go worry about that. But no one comes out and ever defends on that side. The culture thing could go so many different ways because, like, I'm tired of listening to people take shots at Toronto, but I'm also tired of not hearing anyone that's actually on the Leafs defending it. I'm tired of, like, the general immaturity off the ice and the immaturity on the ice. And yeah, like, I look at that comment and I see a lot there. But I don't know what that ultimately translates to or what that means or if that factors in at all or what's going on.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting comment in part because what I'm not sure Pelly understands what a significant culture change would actually look like, what the end result is, just because he's not really a hockey guy in that way. Now, to his credit, what he said was, you don't necessarily create a culture from scratch. You create a condition, and then the culture develops within that condition organically. And he pointed to last year's Blue Jays run as an example of that. And I will say that, like, something to, not to do too much of the cross sports stuff, but something that Atkins and Shapiro with the Blue Jays talked about ad nauseum was about like the character of guys that they wanted to have on the team. Like that really mattered to them to the point where you actually wondered if they were making some of the right moves from an on-field perspective because they were adamant about that. Now, I don't know if that will translate in the same way on the hockey side. And I think you bring up an interesting point when you talk about like the clothes and the presentation and that stuff. And, we are on YouTube now, so you can see me and you know that I have very little credibility in these arenas. What I'll say is, like, generally speaking, it's not the sort of thing I would care about, but I will say that like things have been so rotten in Toronto that I'm open to the idea that something a little bit more punitive might be worthwhile. I think that the idea of being a Maple Leaf meaning something is important. And I think to do more cross sport, more baseball, I think of the New York Yankees and their no beard policy. And as someone who's generally worn a beard for my adult life, I always thought like that's bullshit and that's stupid. And these are grown men and you should trust them to conduct themselves how they want to conduct themselves. But to some degree, that helped establish a concept of being a Yankee means X. And like
Yeah.
some of what it means might be like a little bit stupid if you pick it apart and you look at each individual point. But when you have rules and ideas like that, you do to some degree, and maybe it's too pressure packed and too buttoned up, and you can criticize Yankees culture and they haven't won since 2009, and then ended up getting rid of the beard thing. But being a Yankee means something, and being a Leaf should mean something. And at this particular moment in time, it's not super clear that it does. And that should be part of the solution. To what degree that's going to drive wins and losses, and whether the goalie makes a critical save or whether you convert on a power play, who fucking knows? But when you're talking about a vision for the team, that's like Pelly's job. It's about vision and structure, and it's about the big picture. When you talk of the big picture, that is something to think about.
Yeah, and to be clear, we're not isolating it to, having some form of dress code, even though there's kids in
No, it's
high
an
schools.
example.
Even though there's kids in high schools with uniforms across Ontario that dress nicer to go to school 5 days a week than this hockey team does to make a lot of money and play poorly. But it's all, every single piece of it kind of chips away as you come across as to what it is, or again, the same way it bothers me. It's like, oh, are you over the hill and now not very good at hockey, but you're from here and you want to come back here for a little homecoming of sorts now that you're 38 years old? You missed your chance. Your chance was when you were 30. Your chance was when you were 28. Your chance was when you requested a trade instead of having some sort of RFA situation play out at 24, the way Matthew Tkachuk forced his hand to Florida in the first place. You want to come here? That's when you come here. It shouldn't be this like, oh yeah, we're happy to have you because you want to come here at the end and you're a big name and you're
We'll
done.
find out if you were ever on the if we were
And
ever on the no trade list, and if we ever were, then fuck you.
I just,
I don't
it's
know if there's
the,
a mechanism for that. Probably not.
I mean, if you were trying to get the guy back
Well, yeah,
then,
you
then
might
you would
know,
you
but
would
you won't
know.
know by definition.
And so the whole way they kind of conduct it, right? It's like we already see with McDavid. It's like, yeah, McDavid extends and it was like push the can down the road. And it's like, you want to come here when you're what, 37? It's like, yeah, this was a boyhood dream of mine. I'm like, well, you could have been a UFA at 30. You extended to have Tristan Jarry be your goalie.
The Leafs would have paid you as much as anyone else, maybe
More
more,
than anybody else.
and you would have made
Uh,
more on off ice stuff.
by far, he would have made significantly more money. So, you know what I mean? It's just like I just wish they had those standards across the board. I found that comment. The best thing he said is that they weren't closing the doors on any sort of structure or hiring or what that might look like from a management perspective. But the most interesting thing he said was that piece about culture and some of the things that happened that shouldn't happen. And like that original question was like, can you define the word culture and how would you like to see it? And I thought his overall answer was like weird. It didn't,
Well, it's not about
you,
like
you know,
people
it,
smiling when they come into work every
yeah,
day. Yeah.
yeah, and like pillars of accountability. And I get it. I just maybe on my end, I'm conflating culture with standards, I find that they just do not have standards as an organization. And that's just everything from the way they conduct themselves and the product they put out and the things that they tolerate or don't tolerate from players. Which honestly, now that I think about it, it's like, what do they really not tolerate? Everything is about hand holding. Like they never look at a guy and just say like, no, like you don't act like that here.
Well, like that idea of standards, a lot of that resides with the head coach because the head coach is the one that can say, I'm yanking you off the ice for that insanely, lazy getting off the ice that cost us, or like lack of back check or failure to whatever, stand up for a teammate, whatever the offense is. It's the coach who can take away the ice time, the coach who can take you off the power play, the coach who can sit you for a game. And also, I think the coach who's going to have a good idea of what his team is capable of and what's just not good enough. Like, a lot of what the Leafs have done right now, it doesn't matter because like the season is over and they're in this like very slim chance of getting this tank. But some of the stuff they've done, like getting outshot, in the 40 to 14 type of range, like that stuff happens. Like that's just not acceptable for any team under any circumstances with NHL players. Like some of that resides with the coach, where the coach is like, listen, like you have to get here. Like I know you guys are shit, but like you got to take 40% of the shots in this game. Like you have
Yeah.
to.
To
Or
that,
like that's irresponsible to not get to that. But like so that like we haven't talked about coaching at all in this because that's it's been about Treliving. But when we talk about standards going forward, the coach is going to play a huge role in trying to finally establish that, as you said, for the first time in a long time.
yeah, and you're gonna have to like it's so many, it feels so many steps away still because you might be hiring a president who then hires a GM. You might be hiring a GM. You have to sort out what your hiring structure is even going to be and your overall management structure. And that's before you get to the coach. And I guess since we last recorded, Bruce Cassidy was also fired. So obviously that's piqued people's interest now, where it's like, she just go ahead and hire him before someone else does. And
My first instinct, and this, I guess this isn't right based on the reporting, but when Treliving was fired, I was like, oh, they want to get somebody in that maybe there's a coach that they want.
it's
Like maybe they
possible.
want to get one of those coaches quickly, or what it could have been the front office side. Like they want to get someone in quickly. That's the urgency. But apparently, the reporting is that it's more about Treliving and him wanting to get out from the situation. But like when I just first heard the news, that's what I thought. It's like, oh, they need to go. They feel like they need to go get, say, Cassidy, and like you can't do that with Treliving.
I mean, look, the season ends what, April 16th, so you got 2.5 weeks here. Is anyone firing their coach between now and then? And then how long are teams going to take to fire their coach after that? And really, who's firing their coach?
That you would want too. Like
That
it's someone might be available. It doesn't make them a candidate.
and well, even just in terms of who's firing their coach, that Brad Treliving or sorry, Pete DeBoer or Bruce Cassidy are going to look and be like, I definitely want that job, right? Like if I look through it, I don't think Travis Green's getting fired in Ottawa. The Columbus job could be open. We'll see, but it
Not
sounds like
sexy.
no, and it sounds like they're probably going to try their best to keep Bonus, which makes sense. Talkett's not getting fired. I would be surprised if Todd McClellan gets fired, but they would be in the same boat as the Leafs. I would imagine Steve Yzerman would probably get fired before McClellan at this rate. So then a new GM would have to get hired and then decide on McClellan. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot there. I don't think Washington's firing Carberry. I could see Jersey
That was,
firing
yeah,
Sheldon.
that was one of the
That's
ones that came to
possible,
mind.
right? But they're also in that same boat where it sounds like Tom Fitzgerald might get fired, which is fair. So now they're gonna have to again hire a GM who's then gonna have to make a decision. Like those teams are now behind the Leafs. Like the two teams I guess I've circled so far are Jersey and Detroit. Florida's not firing Maurice, and whether the Rangers fire Mike Sullivan or not, I think is irrelevant. Like Bruce Cassidy's not jumping, or Pete DeBoer are not jumping to go. I actually don't even think the Rangers would want to spend that much money to coach those guys while they're actively admitting that they're just rebuilding. So that's the East. And then you get the West, which LA, you could make the case. Like if they don't make the playoffs, they're probably firing him. Or I mean, like it's just an interim position anyway. And LA always holds intrigue for people. That one's a toss up, I'll call it. I think there's more bad than good there. I also don't know if those two guys, like DeBoer's from here and Cassidy's Canadian too. Like going to LA is a lot, right? Like you really got to be sold by it. You know, Vancouver non-starter, Calgary non-starter, St. Louis probably a non-starter, Winnipeg's a non-starter. I don't even think Seattle will fire Lambert. San Jose is probably not going to fire their coach. I don't even think Chicago will fire Blasthill, right?
Yeah,
So
I mean,
you're
should
like, from the Leafs' perspective, you're looking at it, or I would be looking at it right now saying, I don't think we need to rush to hire one of these guys. And also, like, people talk, right? Like, if there's already momentum or interest in DeBoer, which, like, first of all, you need to hire a new guy and all that stuff, but, like, he'll know. You don't think DeBoer is keeping an eye out? You don't think he'd sit there and be like, yeah, I'll coach 29-year-old Austin Matthews and Nylander, who's going to throw up, what, 85 points this year? A joke of a team. 80 points, whatever it is. Like there'll be interest in those from those guys, you know, and DeBoer, Cassidy's getting all the attention, but DeBoer to me is very like Pat Burnsy vibes back in the day, right? Where DeBoer went to a bunch of stops and he was relatively successful, but he didn't get over the hump. And it's just kind of like lingering there for him. And look, that's just like me speaking anecdotally. I don't know. I get that kind of vibe from him where it's like he hasn't done it yet, but he's knocked on the door a number of times. He's genuinely a really good coach. You know, he's a bit gruff. He's at times softened up, although he in part got fired by Dallas because he didn't soften up and just straight up called out Ottinger. And you got to remember when he got fired by Vegas after an injury plagued year and they missed the playoffs entirely. And then they canned him, and then they hired Bruce Cassidy, and then Vegas won the cup the very next year. And look, I've met DeBoer, I've chatted with him before. He's a really good dude. I don't know him. I'm not even going to pretend like I know him. But I just wonder if there's a part of him that sits there and looks at the Leafs, who've been a little injured, not crazy, but they've been reasonably injured this year, and just goes like, yeah, like I got fired from this injury plagued team who was like good before then, and this Leafs team made the playoffs 9 years in a row, went through some transition injuries. Like I might be able to come in there and swing that a lot quicker than people think, provided you have a competent GM. I think both of those coaching options are pretty available to them, unless they, you know, completely drag ass on hiring a GM. But like I think there's tons of time right now.
yeah, I think that's a good point about the availability of other coaching spots that are attractive and why, there might not be that level of urgency there. Those are the two names that, you're going to hear the most until they're off the board. Much like it's worthwhile being open-minded about the GMs. Like, I think it's also worth being open-minded about the coaches, and there are probably guys out there who don't come to mind or we don't know much about who would do a good job. I think Craig Berube, for instance, was an example of an uninspired, non-creative choice, basically because a guy had the ring on the resume. So doing the opposite of that could theoretically work. Uh, I'm I I think you're gonna get significantly improved coaching regardless of what happens. Like in some ways it feels lower stakes because the standard Brube set this year is so low that I think like not only from a tactical perspective things are going to be better in terms of player deployment, that unless the person is just interpersonally like the biggest doofus in the world, like he'll be liked and get more buy-in as well. Like it's going to be an upgrade almost regardless of who it is. And that doesn't mean that every choice is the right choice, but I would have far fewer sleepless nights out the coach thing because I think to a certain degree it's going to sort itself out. Again, that does things can always go wrong. We're talking about your Toronto Maple Leafs here, but it feels like there will be an upgrade, a much needed upgrade that can, be a part of trying to turn this thing around, maybe not to Stanley Cup champion level, but to respectable level in the near future.
The other thing that we should probably discuss a little bit more detail is just this I he essentially nixed a rebuild. And look, I know a lot of people are just like blow it up and done with these guys, and I get it. I also think you spend franchises spend, you know, half a century looking for a guy as good as Matthews.
Some have
And
never had him.
right, a lot of them haven't. And he's not that old. And this is why it bothers me that they didn't fire Berube way back in American Thanksgiving when it was clearly obvious. He had no clue because you needed to see him with a different coach just to see what it looked like and see if there was a spark, see if there was some confidence that you could have. And actually, yeah, he's something was weird there with Berube and whatever it was, and that's not actually him. He's closer to the guy who literally has won a Hart Trophy and 3 Rocket Richards, including having the most ridiculous goal scoring season anyone's had in this league in like 30 years. Um, and he's at a prime enough age that you should expect him to return fully. And now you have no basis for it. But given all that, and given the fact that they don't have their first round pick into the next 3 years, I find it incredibly difficult to sit there and say you're going to rebuild. And I also look and say, I mean, in terms of making the playoffs, I don't think it's like some tall task to make the playoffs next year. Like they'll need to make like 3 or 4 good moves, which isn't nothing. But I don't think it's like Easton Cowan's clearly good. Like he's good. I wish it pisses me off watching him now because I wish they did what we said to do with him in the first place, which was send him down to the minors, give him like 30 games or whatever to get going and get acclimated to pro hockey, and then call him up around Christmas or New Year's and just have him go from there. Instead, they yo-yoed around his minutes. He was unsure and unconfident. The blown tire against Detroit in overtime was a pivotal moment in their season. And then he just didn't play. And now there's post break when they're out, they're like, well shit, I guess we might as well play him a ton. Like you could have geared him up for this properly in the minors so that in that middle portion of the season when you really needed someone to like emerge the way he is now, he would have done it then. Instead, you were like, actually, we should like try to play him a little bit back then. And it looked like what it looked like. But that part aside, like he's good. Like him and Nylander have something. There's something there with those guys. Knies is good. Like Knies is going to be better next year. I'm extremely disappointed in Knies this year. I was extremely disappointed in his Anaheim game. Extremely. But
Like
he's good.
Monday night,
Yes. Where was he?
he had the one sequence. He had the one sequence where he pinballed two guys, remembered what he could still do in the immediately before Carlson scored the first goal of the
What
game. And I thought, oh,
one
there's Matthew Knies. And then the rest of the game, not so much.
one sequence when they tore your line mate's MCL. Like, are you enjoying your $7+ million salary every year? The guy
I
who helped you get it had his MCL torn. Who did you target? There was one scrum with Bennett Sinecki where he kind of tried to grab him in the first period. That was that was about it. Like there's so much talk about Domi getting that fight. Nye should have got that fight to me. I would have looked been like, that's my guy. That's my line mate. I wasn't on when it happened. That's like, he wasn't even on the ice. He didn't even
Yeah, but
make the
I
face off.
I get Domi doing it. I get like Domi supposedly Matthews is like best friend on the team. He's
Because
someone who
that's
actually knows how to fight. So it's like a set
and
piece for the audience.
Knives doesn't know how to fight.
Not like Domi does. Domi's got way more experience fighting than
He
Knies.
has way more
I,
experience, but Knives can fight.
Knies can fight because he's big and strong and
Yeah,
young,
exactly.
but Domi can fight because he knows how to fight. Those are two different
That's
things. So like,
I would have happily taken Knies in that fight.
I'm not complaining about it being Domi. That made sense
I
to me.
from Domi's standpoint, I'm not complaining. I'm complaining from Knives' standpoint. And
Only
he
one
wasn't
of them can fight. Only one of them can fight Gudas.
that should have
Like
been a
it should have
borderline
been
line
Carlos'
brawl.
fight. It should have been Riley's fight. Like there's a million guys who should have
What
fought Gudas, but
what
like
was
only one of them was going to.
what was the point of putting all those guys on the ice? Like you put Pizzetta on to take the face off so you could watch Domi fight? What was the point of that?
I mean, I guess that I don't know. I don't know what they thought Anaheim was going to do or how they figured that was going to play out. I don't think that that was the plan. I think Gudas kind of, I don't know, he kind of preempted it, I guess. The whole thing was very
Look,
weird from Gudas. I don't
good
know how we've like ended up having this segment now, but like the whole thing was very weird with Gudas because it would have been much more fun. And this is me to some degree stealing a Kiprios take, which I don't do very often, but like if he had been more of a heel, if the fact that he was so submissive in the run up to it and being like, I'm sorry, I'm a bad guy, I need to learn from my mistakes, just kind of took a lot of the air out of it. And then he didn't really participate in the fight either. Like it would have been a lot more of an occasion if he'd been like, I play really hard, shit happens, and if someone comes to fight me, then we'll see how that goes. But
they got
instead, it was like
borderline
all heat.
goaded. They got borderline goaded into just kind of like going at him. Whereas to me, like it should have just been a line brawl from the start. Like just going after Gudas was not enough. In my like it was a fine response all in all for the game
Yeah,
and
like the
everything.
overall game, there was a lot of physicality.
I,
Cowan, Domi again,
I'd give it a
Pizzetta.
I'd give it a B.
Yeah,
It's not an
it
A.
wasn't
It's not
like
an A. It's
it
not an
wasn't
A.
unbelievable. I think
And
they did broadly
and
what was expected.
and for a season that's in the gutter, I wanted it an A. Again, like Nick, what are the standards here? I would be looking, being like, you tore our captain's MCL. Like, where's Leo Carlson all night? Did anyone run him? McCabe like maybe got a little slash in on Cutter Gauthier that might have hurt him, which is kind of interesting, but like fairly innocent.
I'm not so
Uh,
interested in like let's go out and
I
hurt a
am.
young
I
guy who's
am.
not involved in
I
any of
am.
this.
Don't hurt our captain. He wasn't involved in shit that game. Don't hurt him. Don't even look at him. If you do, like we're gonna have a problem. They didn't have a problem. Instead, Gudis just sat there. He's like, "Yeah, that's fine. You can like go after me. Just don't touch my teammates." That's what he was doing.
Which is, yeah, he's the captain of that team, and
I
he's an
get what
old man,
Gudis.
and that's how
I
he should
get
have
what
handled it.
I get what Gudis is doing. Like I said, I think the Leafs got goaded into a little bit. I would have been like, "We're going after everyone but you." Like I'm always reminded, and I've definitely brought this up before. I probably did right after the Gudis thing a couple episodes ago. Sean Avery talking about Tom Wilson fighting Artemi Panarin with the Rangers, which was insane. And they asked him about it, and he's like, I wouldn't even have gone after Wilson. I would have put one in the corner, and when Braden Holtby went to go play the puck, I would have annihilated him. And I would have skated by their bench, and I would have looked and said, that's his fault. And that is a significantly worse feeling than you fighting Domi at center ice. It's a significantly worse. Like they're trying to win their division. And I would be looking, saying, you ended our captain. Like he ended his season, Nick. Like he had surgery the next week. It was such a piece of shit hit. Like that hit makes me sick to my stomach. It's a brutal hit. And I'd be looking going, absolutely not. Like we didn't get enough out of it. Like it was again, it was a fine enough response. It's not worthy of like, tearing them apart. It was a B though. For me, an A is like you're actually looking at some other guys on the team and going like you can thank Radko for the night you're having and potentially the couple weeks you're gonna have after it as a result of how you feel after tonight. Like that's what, and in a season where this season's over for them, like they have nothing left to play for. They're playing out the string. They don't even have anything to lose. They don't even have the like we're in a loose playoff race excuse. This is all you had left. You could have went out and just tuned guys up and got suspended or whatever the case was, and it would have been worth it. I just that was such a bullshit hit. And you have Knies, his line mate, And it was like a few little scrums. Like there were a few times he like, looked to finish some hits and stuff like that. He should have been frothing at the mouth. I'm not even going to name other players on other teams, but like you want to talk about like actual power forwards in the league. If their captain had that happen to them, the next time you play that team, it would be a nightmare. Otherwise, you're not a power forward. You're like JVR. You're like bigger and skilled and can score. And you don't hit and you barely fight. That's JVR. It's fine. But then don't be 230 pounds. Be
And that's
215 pounds and a lot faster.
Well, like that's the storyline for Nyes in the future, right? Like he's not a fully realized player. We don't know exactly what it's going to be. Like right now, he's on the trajectory that you're describing. Like right now, he is on the I am a big skill guy trajectory. And, maybe a change in coaching could play a role in bringing that other side out of him. Maybe that other side won't be brought out, and we're going to have to see. I understand being disappointed in Nyes as an individual just because he is so capable of delivering on that. And you look at
We
Easton Cowan, right? Like, Nylander has the funny incident where he has like extremely minor contact with the goalie. He gets contact, and then Cowan like is an absolute missile in there. If Nyes acts in that same way, like he is creating a lot of havoc, more than Cowan, and give Cowan credit. People are already saying like this is someone who is potentially a bit of a culture changer and has learned his lesson and
he
is
is.
proceeding accordingly.
He is. I love that kid. He's sitting there like he took it to heart. Like you could feel it. And fans aren't stupid. And they see that and they associate with that and they ride with it. And yeah, I'm just we talked about it in the summer. I said Nyes needed to be some level of emotional leader, like some guy that gets games going. And he doesn't. He doesn't do that at all. He's skilled and he's going to produce. He's career high in points. Like he does a lot of good things. Not to say he's a bad player. And maybe I have to scale back my expectations of him. But I just look at this guy and say, like, you're a truck. And I hear him talk sometimes, and I'm like, is anyone talking to you about what your role should be? Even a week ago or whatever, the Islanders play the Senators, and Kachuk and Anders Lee square up to start that game. I don't know if you saw it, or I don't know if you heard Brady Kachuk talk about it after on their podcast.
Not
Kind
an
of like,
avid listener on
that's
the
fair. That
Chuck
clip,
Brothers
that clip
podcast.
kind of went around. I don't listen to it too, but I'll catch the odd clip here or there. And that one I did catch that clip. And it was kind of like, do we want to get this game going? And it was like, yeah, like I'll do it. And they fought basically. It was pretty much that was it. It was like, yeah, like are we doing this? Like we want to get this game going. And like those are the kinds of things like Ottawa's in their division. We've never once seen those two guys go at it. Like Anders Lee at 35 can fight Brady, but Knies at 23. And again, like I go back to it's like guys taking shots. It's like Brady Kachuk talked about that Gudas on Matthews knee, right? And if I have like pride of my team, and maybe they just don't know, maybe none of the players on the Leafs know that he was kind of popping off about the lack of response and being upset. That's entirely possible. But in the event that they do know, it's not like they played Ottawa and anyone went to Brady and was like, don't talk about our fucking team. Instead, they got outshot, what, 43-14 and got thoroughly humiliated, and no one breathed on anybody. And Pizzetta actually watched the game in the press box so that Cali, about to go back to Sweden, Yarncroke, could get more shifts on the fourth line. Like, the whole thing is just, I don't know. I don't know who is talking to this guy. I don't know why no one's looking at him going, like, you have it in you physically to be a tone setter. And I just don't see it. And I think back to when they played Boston in the playoffs a few years ago. If you remember, there was like that scrum, and Pasternak and Marchand were kind of being goofs. And I think it was Riley that Pasternak kind of went at. And Knies got in there and hit him and laughed in his face. And he's like, if you want to go at someone, like, go at me. And it's like that was the peak of Knies getting involved in shenanigans.
It's funny
And it's been
because
downhill since like you played with Mitch for a year and just decided like we're good. I don't understand. Like, I don't know where his gamesmanship is or his ability to impact games physically. And again, like he spent the summer gaining weight for what?
To make him more susceptible to injury, it appears. Like
To skate slower.
it's uh it's interesting because there's been, so much talk over this era about, toughness and culture related to that. And they've surrounded, the core four, what's left of them, with so many different iterations of guys they thought would bring that element. And it never really worked because the guys at the top of the roster are ultimately the ones who are going to drive that culture and have it trickle down, not the other way around. And when you look towards the Leafs' future, and there aren't many foundational pieces for the future, like this is a veteran team, is a bunch of old guys, and it's a very uncertain future. But two guys you would point to are Cowan and Knies. And Cowan, through his attitude, and Knies, through his physical capabilities, have a chance to establish something else in the years going forward that looks a little bit better, that looks a little bit stronger, that makes them more comfortable in games against the Floridas of the world, or the Bostons of the world as they previously existed. There's a potential for that. Like there's a potential for the next core version of the Leafs. And we don't know about, Matthews' future, even Nylander's future on the team. Like Cowan and Knies are the guys who could potentially be around, the young guys, and they could have a slightly different flavor, but that does rely on Knies refinding some of that, which he did not demonstrate this year.
The crazy thing is that whole thing started with a part where I was actually trying to say, like, between Matthews, Nylander, Cowan, Nyes, a still productive JT who either shouldn't be the 2C or you just have that loaded up offensive line and you bring in like a very good matchup center on a separate line. But between all those guys, like, I think that top six is easily capable of being good next year. Like, you need to find a right winger and you need to find a center, like a solid center. But it
Yeah,
doesn't
you
have
need
to
a
be like
real
a
center,
full,
like
yeah,
a proper one.
yeah. It doesn't have to be like a stud, but it has to be like a legitimately good center. Like the Habs center, right? Second line center right now is Oliver Kapanen. He's having a pretty good year, but I mean, I'm not losing it on that guy. Like, I go through, it's like I don't even think most listeners could tell me who Boston's second line center is. They hear Fraser Minton a lot, but it's like you go through lineups and Ottawa's the one team where I sit there and go, like, they actually have proper center depth, which is very upsetting,
Yes,
right? But
it's upsetting how good Ottawa is
it's
in
like,
terms of
yeah,
like everything other than getting a save.
yeah, right. That's the saving grace there. But all that to say is, like, I don't think that group is beyond reproach. Like, it could be solved. The defense is trickier. The defense, like, you have to bring in like one legitimate guy at minimum and pray to God that Tanev is like back. But ideally, you're doing more than that. So all that to say is, like, I could easily see a path forward back to the playoffs next year. Like, it doesn't. That's not out of the question. Like, we're watching teams. Were I to say this time last year, in the Islanders, in the Penguins, even the Sabres, right? If I was like, all these teams are making the playoffs, Columbus maybe now at this rate, a lot of people would have laughed. That's half the playoff group,
Yeah, I
right? Like,
understand people who are pessimistic and really want to bang the drum for rebuild, but there's just two huge factors. Factor one is, there's the pick issues where, I mean, even though the Philly pick is top 10 protected, then you're kicking one down the line. And if you're having a proper rebuild, then that's going to last multiple years. So you're gonna lose out on some of the fruits of that rebuild. That's important. And then there's also the Matthews factor where if Matthews still wants to be around, wants to sign long term, that's a possibility. Like it is difficult to tear it down to the studs with him in the building. And so, unless Matthews really wants to go, like that forces your hand. If he really wants to go, then things look a little different. And then you have a rebuild that has less reward than other rebuilds, makes it even more painful. Still a realistic possibility, but I don't think you have to be hyped up on hopium to believe that they can be a relevant team next year with some adjustments. Yeah, not an inner circle contender, not as good as people have thought they were at other times during this era, probably. Like more of a scrapping for wild card, scrapping for number three in the Atlantic, if that, maybe needing some breaks. But that's kind of maybe the best place for them to live in a short term period. And then if the bottom falls out of that, then you enter a rebuild a little bit down the line, having potentially traded Matthews, having be getting yourself into a situation where you actually have all your picks, maybe moving some other people. Like they're just not really super well positioned for that tear down this second. So you might as well kick that can down the road and see if we can be competitive next year. We'll see about the year after that, but like it hurts to not be able to reap the draft pick benefit without that. Going through the sacrifice is just not worth it.
Yeah, the thing I didn't like, which kind of preempted the whole thing, was that Pelly kind of already set that out. Like again, like you just sat there and you're like, I'm not a scout. I'm not going to say who's on left wing. Okay, then don't talk about it. How like he's talked out of both sides of his mouth on that one, which really pissed me off. It's like just pick it. If you're gonna sit there and say like you're involved, then do that so that we can criticize it heavily until you are no longer involved at all. But don't sit there and be like, I hear all this chatter about I'm involved and I'm not because I don't want to do any of this stuff. But also we're not rebuilding.
But have you
And
heard about
also,
Vinny
have you heard about
Borghese
Vinny Borghese?
absolutely tearing it up
Just
with the
one
Marlies?
one assist in 2 games with the
I'm
Marlies.
not
This guy
involved though.
is, and I feel bad for that kid because like
Yeah,
he's that draft me. It's like I got drafted. It's like you talking about me today? Like I like him in general. Like he lit it up
he's
in
exactly the
college.
type of guy you should add who has a little bit
Yeah,
of upside, and who knows, maybe we'll see him someday. Like
yeah.
absolutely no, yeah, nothing
But
disparaging about Vinny Borghese. He's
yeah,
representative of what's going on, not
but
someone
but
to be
he's
dunked
but
on.
he's tiny, and there's a reason he had to go
Yeah.
the path that he did. Because if he was 6'2", the bona fides would actually probably make him a first round pick. If you look at the rest of his body, like literally the only black mark on his work is essentially that he's tiny and that maybe he didn't produce like an incredible rate. You know, like he wasn't like Lane Hudson production. He was just like solidly productive. But again, don't sit there and say like, "Oh, I'm not involved." I was just in the room. And here are some players that I know out loud. And here's a guy that we signed in college. And also, here's the direction of the team. I just all of that to me was like that's a problem. So it's a I just found myself listening to it live and then going through it again, just thinking like what a bizarre press conference. On one hand, you did say a few things that I liked where you didn't limit yourself. On the other hand, you just talk complete nonsense out of both ends of your mouth. And then you made like some like interesting comments about culture, which I don't think you'll properly grasp or deliver on. But I at least appreciated that you identified that. I just have no faith in your ability to properly execute or hold that to a standard in which it should be, which it has not been for a very long time. So, yeah, I mean, interesting times in Leafland. They need a new GM. They should need a new coach. I just, at what point, and a good one to kind of end on and mull over, at what point have they not hired a GM? Will you go like, okay, what's going on here? Like, how long should they get?
I mean, to be fair, like he laid down his own timeline. He said like mid-May would be good, late May is fine, early June is, I
Is
think he
that
said,
fine though? I don't think mid-May is fine.
no, I mean, I don't see any reason not to get this done as soon as possible. Like when you're talking about a cultural organizational reset too, it's not necessarily about exclusively the deals that are being made. You got to sift through the staff, see who you want to keep, see who you want to bring in, start to establish, standards and practices to avoid getting overly corporate here in the Pally mold. But yeah, as soon as they can have that leader in place, the better. Like I said, if he goes to plan and it is sometime in May, I don't consider that to be a cataclysmic disaster. It's more so, as far as I'm concerned, the sooner this gets done, the better. So anything sooner than that is a bonus that I see only benefiting them, but I'm not going to panic unless we are kind of in that early June sort of area because that does seem like way too long to leave this. I just don't see it playing out that way. I don't see why it would. Like they have the money to offer someone for this job. So it's like if the person is interested, the negotiation won't be hard and people are interested. So I think it's going to come together.
Just ask him, he'll tell you. Got 7 messages, which was
Yeah.
also a weird thing to do. It's like,
Yeah. Odd.
what do
Yeah.
you, again, you're the Leafs. Like, hold, like, you don't even need to say it. It's like, yeah, we know. Like, that's how you should be acting if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, not we got to tell people that people messaged us to let us know that they're interested. I just, yeah, I mean, to me, by May 1st, I'm going to start getting antsy. It's like, you really need more than a month for this?
Yeah, but that might just be the way, like, that's the way he thinks things should go from kind of an outsider perspective, as opposed to some indication that people aren't interested or they have no idea what they want to do with it. Like, he might believe in being methodical. And I'm not saying that's the right way to go about it, but again, presenting the timeline, I don't necessarily think it's fair to be like, he presented this timeline, and if he isn't 2 weeks ahead of his own timeline, he's bungled the situation. I don't think that's a fair standard to hold them to.
Yeah, I'm not gonna hold them to it. I just, again, around there, I'm kind of sitting there going, okay, like we should kind of have an indication of which way this is going by then. Like it really shouldn't take until almost June, especially if you do have designs on targeting some coaches and stuff. Like teams are also going to make, right now, you've bought yourself a little bit of leeway compared to some of those teams we mentioned, but that's going to end soon. Like if you want to get the jump on things and really get this thing going,
Might as well use this advantage. Like they've
right?
carved
Yeah.
out this Treliving early exit advantage, whether that was like their intention from the beginning or not. If it's more Treliving thing, doesn't matter. They have this sliver of time that other teams don't have. So get at it. All right, we're going to leave it there. We really appreciate everyone who listens in. We appreciate it even more when you're leaving ratings, review, things of that nature. Help us grow the show. And we'll be back with you again soon.